Hello everyone, we are going to be discussing artificial neural networks today. This team is composed of John Ford, Emmy Jakob, and Gloria Fawn. A little bit about our agenda for today. We're going to be doing an introduction to neural networks, then going to dive into what a neural network actually is. We also provided some example MATLAB code that we'll be showing and giving you a demonstration on later, and then we'll also finish this with a conclusion. So just as an introduction, over the past few decades, scientists have been making computers to mimic the brain functions. A little bit about the brain. The brains have between 50 and 500 billion cells called neurons. These neurons are interconnected and they are used to make decisions in the human body. If you trace the neuron's pathway, it's typically a linear path that you can follow. The computer equivalent to this is going to be a transistor, and the transistors are kind of like the neurons, and those neurons, when they're combined together, they make up a microprocessor, and typically these microprocessors have about 2 billion transistors within them. A little bit about the differences between neurons in the brain and an artificial neural network. There's a drastic difference between the computers and humans' brain structure. Now, how can those computers be more like the brain? The answer to this question is going to be neural networks, which we're going to dive into next.
Alright, so what is a neural network? A neural network is a function, approximate, or a simplified model of the brain. And there are many applications. We can look at things like detecting fraud when it comes to activity in a bank, recognizing handwriting, as well as driving cars or self-driving cars is often used for neural networks. There are a few different examples for applications, but you don't have to teach it everything, which is the beauty of a neural network, and it has the capacity to learn. So how does a neural network work? So the basic idea is to stimulate brain cell activity in a computer, in essence. And from a few to a few million artificial neurons called units, those are inputs, hidden, and outputs. What you want to do is have a fully connected. So through those inputs, hidden, and output neurons, the neural network basically connects those hidden units, and they connect them to each output unit. So each hidden unit is connected to an output to the output unit. Each connection has a weight, either a higher or lower weight, and a higher weight meaning it has more influence on the neural network itself when it comes to the output. Information flows through the neural network when it's being trained or in operation, and it receives its feedback through a back propagation. So what are some applications for artificial neural networks? One of the big ones is clustering, and it puts basically similar patterns together. We've seen this before in our academic careers when we've done where would you place a police officer based on where they received the calls in that area. The next one is pattern recognition. This is something that you can see when, for example, Google, as they drive by and take pictures for the Google Street Maps, they look at images that are on houses for their house addresses, and they're able to recognize and confirm house addresses based on the image that they take from their Google Street Map cars. The next one is function approximation, and as well as prediction and forecasting, which is something that you could see in forecasting in a economic setting or in some type of fiscal setting. So an activation function for artificial neurons. The activation function is a function that defines an output given the inputs of the neural network. So they can either be a linear activation function, a piecewise linear activation function, a threshold activation function, a tangent hyperbolic, or a sigmoidal, which is a majority of the neural networks that we use this for.
Alright, so now we will do a demonstration of MATLAB, and I'll just quickly go over it. And so the topic of this would be vintage wine, and this is a pattern recognition application of the neural network. So in the data set, there are 178 samples of wine, and they all come from 3 wineries in Italy. And so the objective is to classify the wine to a winery based on 13 attributes, and some of the attributes are listed there: alcohol, malic acid, color intensity, hue, and so we'll see if it works. So here I'm just going to open up the neural network tool, and this will be under Pattern Recognition app. So I will load an example data set, which will be wine vintage. And so you can see here, 13 by 178 matrix, 13 attributes of 178 wines. Import this. So the inputs, as Emmy was talking about, this would be the input unit and this would be the output unit. Well, a target unit to compare to the output unit. And now, next. So 70% of the data set, which is 124 samples, will be used in training, 15% in validation, and 15% in testing. And this is just the default, so we have 10 hidden neurons here, and this is a diagram just to kind of visualize that. And now I will train it. Okay, so it's done training. You can look at the confusion matrix. And plot the ROC, which is the receiver operating characteristic plot. Next. Okay, and I'm just going to pass this. We don't need to train it again, and save the simple script. And that just popped up here. Alright, so I saved it, and this is the script that was generated for us from the interface just now, and I'm going to run it. Okay. So now we have our neural network. So just to test and show you, so for example, in the wine inputs, so we want to test the fifth one just to manually show you. It probably already tested this. Then you could do net so it's saying that there's a 99.76 chance that it came from the first winery, 0.024% chance that it was from the second one, and 0 for the third one. So we'll look at what the target was, what it actually was. And for the fifth one, it came from the first winery. And so that just shows you right there how it works.
And to wrap up this presentation, we're just going to go over what we discussed. We talked about a neural network and what it is, which is basically a connected series of neurons that are in the brain. Those series of neurons can be activated. We also discussed artificial neural networks, which mimic the functions of biological neural networks. We also showed you a presentation on what a neural network can be used for in the MATLAB previously. The artificial neural networks have multiple applications and uses that Emmy discussed earlier. Some of those include clustering and pattern recognition. The exciting thing about all this is that there is a lot of opportunity in the future and in the present for artificial neural networks. Thank you for listening to this presentation. We hope you found it helpful and informative.